I never imagined the day would come when I'd have to prove my worth to the one person who always told me I wasn't enough. My dad called me uneducated and worthless, but that was before I discovered what he had been hiding for years. I was 16 when I first heard those words. It was at a family dinner, everyone around the table, and my dad, the man who was supposed to support me, said it loud and clear. "You'll never make anything of yourself. You're not even worth the effort." That moment stuck with me. It shaped who I became. I worked harder, studied longer, hoping one day I could prove him wrong. But nothing ever changed. I was the invisible one in the family. My older brother got all the praise, all the opportunities. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was always the disappointment, the failure. That's how it felt. Until one day, everything changed. One phone call. That's all it took. A call that would flip my entire world upside down. I found out something about my dad that he never wanted me to know. He wasn't just criticizing me, he was trying to hide his own secret. A secret that had the power to destroy everything he'd built. You see, while he was tearing me down, he was hiding the fact that I was the key to the future of our family business. And it wasn't just any business, it was the one thing he loved more than anything. I decided to take control. I wasn't going to let him break me anymore. The time had come to show him who I really was. I knew exactly what I had to do, and when I walked into that room, I made sure he saw me for who I truly was. The success he never thought I could be. His reaction? Well, that's a story you have to hear to believe. I spent years trying to prove myself, thinking that if I worked hard enough, maybe one day my dad would see me for who I really was. But all he ever saw was the failure, the uneducated, one who would never measure up. It wasn't until I found that letter, hidden in his office, that everything started to change. The moment I picked it up, I knew something was off. The handwriting wasn't his, it was my grandmother's. It was dated a year before her passing, and the letter was addressed to me. My heart raced as I read the first few lines. "You're the only one who can save us." It didn't make sense. My grandmother had passed away, but she'd left me something big. I didn't know what to think, but I knew I had to find out more. That's when I started digging. I uncovered documents, emails, and financial statements, things my dad had hidden for years. I found out that the family business, the one my dad constantly bragged about, was in trouble, big trouble. And the worst part? He had been keeping it all from me, pretending like everything was fine, while silently struggling to keep it afloat. The business was about to collapse, and my dad didn't have the resources to save it. But I did. I had the knowledge, the connections, and the skills he never gave me credit for. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I was the only one who could turn things around. But how could I confront him? How could I tell him that everything he had built was about to come crumbling down unless I stepped in? It wasn't going to be easy, especially after everything he had said to me. "You'll never be anything more than the slow one," he always said. But I was done playing small. I was done letting him define my worth. I knew the risk. Confronting him would mean putting everything on the line, but I had to do it. I had to show him that I was more than his worst assumptions. So, I made the decision. I was going to take control of the business. I wasn't just going to prove him wrong. I was going to save the family empire, without his help. The first step? A meeting with the board of directors. A group of powerful people my dad had trusted to keep everything together. He always spoke about them like they were untouchable, like they could do no wrong. But I knew better. I knew there was one thing they didn't count on me. I walked into that meeting with my head held high, prepared to take on a role no one expected me to be capable of. The board members looked shocked when I introduced myself as the new CEO. "You're the one who's going to fix this?" one of them asked, clearly skeptical. But I stood tall, my heart pounding in my chest, and replied, "Yes, I am." As I sat there, I could feel my dad's eyes burning into the back of my neck, but I didn't flinch. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let him or anyone take it away from me. The room was silent for a moment. Then the chairman spoke up. "We'll give you one shot," he said. "But if you fail, we're done. The company is done." That was all I needed. I had one shot to prove myself, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and countless hours spent working with my team to stabilize the company. Slowly, things started turning around. I knew we weren't out of the woods yet, but I could feel the momentum building. And as the company's financial reports improved, so did my confidence. I couldn't wait to show my dad what I had accomplished. But the real test was still ahead. When I finally called him to let him know what I had done, I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "You did all this?" he asked, like he couldn't believe it. I didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes," I said, "and now I'm in charge." Silence. And then, "You really think you can save this company?" he asked, his tone colder than I had ever heard it before. "I don't think I can," I replied. "I know I can." And just like that, I took my place at the top. Not because of him, not because of anyone else, but because I had proved, once and for all, that I was capable of more than he could ever imagine. The first few months were a whirlwind. Every day felt like a battle, constant meetings, endless phone calls, and trying to pull everything together with a team who didn't fully trust me. But something started to shift. I could see the doubt in their eyes fade, little by little, as the numbers began to turn around. I was no longer just the failure, the uneducated one. I was becoming the leader they didn't expect, but the one they needed. And as I sat in that first quarterly board meeting, listening to the praise and seeing the looks of respect from people who had once doubted me, I realized how far I'd come. But then my dad called. His voice on the other end was different this time, softer. "I hear things are going well," he said, his words careful, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be proud of me. There was a pause, and then, "I didn't think you could do it." It stung, but I wasn't going to let it break me. "I didn't do this for you," I replied, calm but firm. "I did it for me." The line went quiet for a moment. He didn't say anything after that. And maybe that was the point where I knew the real victory wasn't just about saving the company. It was about saving myself. Proving to myself that I could do more than just meet expectations. I could exceed them. Over the next year, I continued to take the business to new heights. I made bold decisions, brought in new strategies, and hired a team that matched my vision. I was turning the company around, brick by brick, and watching the success unfold. But still, no matter how well things were going, I couldn't escape that nagging feeling, my dad's words. He never once apologized, never once admitted he was wrong. And I wasn't sure I wanted him to. I wasn't doing this for his approval anymore. I was doing it for me. But then, everything changed again. One morning, I was in my office, going over the quarterly reports, when I got a call from the family lawyer. "I have something you need to see," he said, his voice tense. "It's about your father." My heart skipped a beat. What could this be? A sense of dread washed over me as I agreed to meet him. When I got to his office, he handed me a sealed envelope. "Your father left this for you," he said. I opened it slowly, my eyes scanning the words, the legal jargon, the paperwork, and then I saw it. A clause in my father's will, something I never expected. My name, listed as the beneficiary of the company, something my dad never told me. I couldn't believe it. My father had known all along that I was the one who could save it. But instead of telling me, he had kept it hidden, expecting me to figure it out on my own. I couldn't help but laugh, bitterly, at the irony of it all. Here I was, the same person he had mocked and dismissed for years, now holding the reins to everything he had built. The reality of it hit me all at once. My dad had always known I was capable, even if he couldn't admit it. But I wasn't going to let that be the last word. No, this was my moment, my final act of independence. The next day, I called him. He didn't know what was coming. "Dad," I said, "I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I've proven who I am, and now it's time for you to recognize that." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could feel the weight of his hesitation, but this time, I didn't back down. "I'm taking full control of the company," I told him. "And you can either support me or step aside." I could hear his breath catch. He didn't expect this. But it didn't matter. I was no longer the failure he had made me out to be. I was the woman who saved everything. And that was something he couldn't take away from me. The truth was, I didn't need his approval anymore. I had built my own success, and I had done it on my terms. For the first time in my life, I could stand tall and say, I did it. And I did it without you. The days that followed were a blur. I had done it, taken control of everything, but now, the weight of the responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I had no time to relax, no time to reflect. I was too busy proving that I belonged here. The board was on edge, watching my every move. Would I be able to keep the company afloat? Would I fall short like they expected me to? I could feel the pressure building with every passing day, but it wasn't just the board that had their eyes on me. It was my father. For the first time, I realized just how much I had been seeking his approval. Even though I had proved myself, I couldn't shake the need for him to acknowledge what I had done. I couldn't help but feel a sense of bitterness.
He had
spent years telling me I wasn't good enough, making me feel small and insignificant. But here I was, running the company he built, and he still wouldn't give me the credit. I started to wonder, did he ever see me for who I really was? Or was I always just a tool in his eyes, someone to be used and then discarded when I no longer fit into his vision? It was late one night, as I sat alone in my office, going over the quarterly report, when I finally received the call I had been dreading. It was him, my dad. He hadn't called since that day I told him I was taking control. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected him to reach out. I hadn't expected him to care. But something in his voice told me this was different. I told him to meet me at the office the next morning. When he walked in, there was an unusual silence between us. He didn't speak right away, just stared at the room, the one he used to run, the one he used to control. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. I never thought you'd be capable of this, he said, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe. But you've done it. You saved the company. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had expected anger, bitterness, maybe even guilt. But this was different. He was acknowledging my success, finally. But why now? Was this just a last-ditch effort to save face? Or did he finally see me for who I truly was? I'm proud of you, he said, almost under his breath, as if it pained him to admit it. I could feel the tension leave my body for the first time in years. My dad, my father, was proud of me. It wasn't the validation I had always wanted, but it was enough. I didn't do this for you, I replied, looking him in the eye. I did this for me. And there it was, the truth that had been buried for so long. I had spent my life trying to prove to him that I was worthy, but in the end, I realized that I didn't need his approval to succeed. I had done this on my own. I didn't need him to tell me I was good enough. The satisfaction of knowing that I was capable of more than he ever thought was enough. As we sat there in the silence, something shifted between us. The years of hurt, of anger, of feeling unseen, it all seemed to melt away. For once, I felt like I had nothing left to prove. I was no longer the daughter who needed to earn her father's approval. I was the woman who had made something of herself. The woman who had saved everything. And as I walked out of that room, I realized that the true victory wasn't in what I had accomplished. It was in finally accepting that I didn't need anyone to define me. Not my father, not anyone. I was enough, all on my own. It's been a year since everything changed, since I took control and finally started living on my own terms. I had thought that once I had the company in my hands, everything would settle into place, that I'd feel the peace I had been craving for so long. But the truth was, nothing was ever simple. Even though the company was thriving, even though I had earned the respect I deserved, there was still one thing I hadn't fully confronted: my father. He had finally acknowledged my success, but he had never fully accepted me, not the way I needed. I started wondering, was I just filling a void, trying to prove myself to him, or was I truly doing this for myself? The doubt crept in slowly, and I realized it wasn't just about saving the company. It was about proving to myself that I could be someone. I wasn't sure I could ever escape the shadow of my father's expectations. One evening, I received a formal letter from my dad's lawyer. My heart skipped a beat. I had moved on from trying to earn his approval, but this letter, it made me nervous. I opened it, and there it was, his final wish. He had written me a letter. It wasn't a formal will, but it was something deeply personal. As I read through it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My father, the man who had told me I wasn't good enough for so many years, had written a letter, giving me full control of the family legacy. I may not have shown it, the letter said, but I always knew you were capable of this. You are the one who can carry on what I started. It's yours now, whether you want it or not. I sat there in disbelief. Was this a final attempt to make things right? Or was it his way of admitting that he had underestimated me all along? I didn't know what to think. There were no more words, no more expectations, just the weight of his approval, or at least his acknowledgement. I folded the letter and set it aside. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I had already built. What mattered was who I had become in the process. I was no longer the daughter fighting for recognition. I was the woman who had made her own path. The company was thriving, and I had taken it to new heights. But the journey wasn't over. I knew I still had so much more to prove, but not to anyone else.
It was all for me now.
One day, while I was reviewing some new expansion plans with the team, I received a call from an unexpected source, the board of directors. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when they spoke, their words were filled with a new level of respect. "We've been watching the progress you've made," they said. "We want you to take the company global. We believe in you." Hearing those words was the final confirmation I needed. It wasn't just about running the business anymore. It was about growing it, expanding it, and leaving a legacy of my own. I had earned the chance to prove my worth in ways no one could have ever imagined, especially not my father. But as I stood in the boardroom, looking at my team, I knew the real victory wasn't in the business or the title. It was in the woman I had become. And that was the most powerful thing of all. I had taken everything that had been used against me, every insult, every "you can't," and turned it into fuel for my success. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The world was finally seeing me for who I really was. Not the daughter of someone else's empire, but the architect of my own. And that was just the beginning. The next chapter was mine to write, and this time, no one was going to stop me. The success I had fought so hard for was no longer just about proving I was capable, it was about pushing beyond the limits I had set for myself. The company was expanding at a rapid pace, new partnerships were forming, and for the first time, I could see the fruits of my labor taking shape. But as things were moving forward, I found myself constantly looking back. Was this truly what I wanted? Was it worth all the pain, the sacrifice, the isolation? The business was thriving, but I wasn't sure if I was living the life I had imagined for myself. Every moment was consumed by meetings, decisions, strategy, until one day, I sat alone in my office late at night, staring at the skyline of the city I had built. It was quiet, too quiet. I realized I had become a stranger to myself. For years, I had fought for the approval of a man who would never truly understand me, but now, I was a stranger to my own life. I had become so focused on success, on showing everyone I was more than just my father's daughter, that I had lost sight of what I really wanted. It was at that moment that I decided to take a step back. I needed to reconnect with who I was before the business, before the titles, before all the expectations. I needed to find the person I had buried under years of proving myself. I didn't know where to start, but I knew it had to be done. The next few weeks were filled with self-reflection, moments of doubt, and flashes of clarity. I started revisiting the things I had loved before, writing, painting, traveling, things I had put aside for years. But something else happened too. The more I took a step back from the business, the more I realized that I wasn't just a product of my father's rejection or the company's success. I was my own person, and that was enough. It wasn't about making him proud anymore, it was about making myself proud. One afternoon, as I sat on a park bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I finally felt at peace. The pressure, the anger, the need to prove myself. It all melted away. I had done it. I had built something that wasn't just for him, but for me. And I didn't need anyone else's validation to know that I had succeeded. But just as I was starting to feel grounded again, an unexpected call came. It was from the family lawyer. "We need to meet," he said. "It's about your father's estate." My heart dropped. What more could there be? I had already inherited everything I needed to carry on his legacy, so what could possibly be left? When I met with him, he handed me a small, sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said, his voice somber. As I opened the letter, I saw the familiar handwriting, the one I had seen on the letter that had given me the company. But this letter was different. It wasn't a business document, it was personal. My father's final words to me were not about the company, not about success, but about forgiveness. "I'm sorry for all the years I made you feel less than," the letter said. "I never gave you the love you deserved. But I'm proud of the woman you've become. You've shown me the meaning of strength, and for that, I will always be proud of you." Those words hit me harder than anything I had ever heard from him. They were the words I had always wanted to hear, but I realized then he had given them to me just when I didn't need them anymore. I had already proven to myself that I didn't need his approval. I had already built my life. But the letter, the apology, it was a gift. A gift that allowed me to let go of the last bit of resentment I had been carrying. I didn't need to be angry anymore. I didn't need to be driven by the need for his approval. I had done it. I had lived my life on my terms. And that was enough. From that moment on, I stopped looking back. I stopped questioning whether I was doing the right thing or not. I knew I was. The company continued to thrive, and I began focusing on new projects, new challenges. But I wasn't doing it for anyone else anymore. I was doing it because it made me happy. I was no longer the daughter trying to prove something. I was the woman who had built something remarkable. All on her own. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I had everything I had ever wanted, not just success, but peace. I had my own life, my own identity, and that was everything. Months passed, and the changes in my life began to feel like a distant memory. At least, that's what I tried to tell myself. But as time went on, I realized that the sense of freedom I had worked so hard for was being challenged. It wasn't the company's success that weighed me down anymore, nor was it my father's shadow that haunted me. No, this time, it was the pressure of living up to my own expectations. I had built something incredible. I had proven to myself that I was more than capable. But deep down, there was still a part of me that wondered if I could keep it up. Could I really continue to lead this company? Could I maintain this level of success without burning out? The questions lingered, and I found myself staring at the numbers on my desk late one night, not knowing how to answer them. I had pushed myself so hard for so long, and now it felt like I was on the edge of exhaustion. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about finding balance, about creating a life that didn't revolve solely around what I had achieved. And that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The pressure had always come from the outside world, but now it was internal. I was the one pushing myself to the breaking point. One evening, as I sat in my office, alone again, my phone rang. It was a call I had been avoiding for weeks. It was from my childhood friend, Emma. We hadn't spoken much since everything had changed. She was still living back in her hometown, working as a teacher. She had been there through some of my darkest days, back when I was just the failure. When I picked up the phone, I didn't know what to expect. "Hey, I've been meaning to call," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I've been hearing a lot of great things about you, and I just wanted to check in." I let out a small laugh. "You've been hearing all that?" I said, trying to keep it light. "I guess you could say things have changed." She paused, sensing the shift in my tone. "I know you're busy," she said, "but you don't have to do it all alone, you know." That simple phrase hit me harder than I thought it would. I had been so focused on doing everything myself, on proving that I could handle it all, that I had forgotten the importance of connection. The people who cared about me. It was as if I had built this incredible empire, only to realize that I had lost sight of the most important thing, myself, and the people who loved me for who I was, not for what I had achieved. "I know," I said softly, the weight of her words sinking in. I think I've just been trying to figure out what's next. Well, Emma said, maybe it's time to figure it out with some help. You've built something incredible, but you don't have to carry the burden alone. You've already done so much. Maybe it's time to take a breath and enjoy it. It was as if the clouds had parted, and I could finally see the way forward. I had been so focused on success, on the grind, that I had forgotten to slow down and appreciate how far I had come. I had forgotten the importance of enjoying the journey, not just the destination. Over the next few weeks, I made some tough decisions. I hired a team of trusted advisors who could help me manage the company and take some of the pressure off my shoulders. I learned to delegate, to trust in the people around me, and most importantly, I learned to prioritize my well-being. I began taking more time for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with friends and family, and I rediscovered the joy in the simple things that had once brought me peace. The changes weren't easy. It took time to let go of the need to control everything, but little by little, I found my balance again. And as the months passed, the company continued to thrive, but this time, I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had learned that success wasn't just about working hard, it was about finding harmony. It was about living a life that was full, not just busy. And as I stood in front of my team at a company celebration one evening, I realized that I had come full circle. I wasn't the same person I had been when I started this journey. I had grown not just as a leader, but as a person. I had found a way to be both successful and happy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. It's been a year since everything shifted, a year since I learned how to truly balance success with happiness. The company continued to thrive, but so did I, growing into the person I always wanted to be. But as much as I tried to focus on the future, I couldn't ignore the past. My father's words, his approval, it still echoed in my mind. I knew I had proved him wrong. I knew I had built something worthy. But somewhere deep inside, I realized that I had never fully forgiven him. Not for the things he said, nor for the way he treated me. Forgiveness wasn't something I could just rush into. It wasn't something that would come easily. It took time, and I had to be patient with myself. One day, as I sat at my desk, reviewing the company's growth, I received a call from the family lawyer again. It wasn't unexpected, but it still made my heart race. This time, he wasn't just calling to talk about business. "I have something you should know," he said, his voice serious. "Your father left something for you, something personal." I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Was it another letter? A final note of acknowledgement? I agreed to meet him the next morning. When I arrived at his office, he handed me a small black folder. "It's from your father," he said. I opened it slowly, and as I did, I realized that this wasn't a letter. It was something far more significant. It was a collection of documents, all tied to the future of the family business, but one stood out among them. A handwritten letter, this time from my father, with instructions for the company's future, his hopes for the direction it would take. As I read through it, I felt a mixture of emotions. He had trusted me with this. He had believed in me, even if he couldn't always show it. The letter outlined everything he had hoped for me to accomplish and left me with the final decision: what would happen next. The weight of that decision settled in my chest. I had been carrying this company on my own for so long, but now, with this letter, I was reminded that it wasn't just my responsibility. It was a legacy. A legacy I had inherited, but one that required careful thought and vision. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had never expected to be put in this position, but now that I was here, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about continuing what my father had started. It was about moving forward, about making this company something new, something that would reflect my values, my vision. I wasn't going to let my father's mistakes define my future. I was going to create my own path, one that honored the past, but looked toward the future. As I stood up, I felt a sense of clarity. The decisions I had to make weren't about pleasing anyone anymore. They were about ensuring that this company remained something worth fighting for, something that could stand the test of time. And I was ready to do that. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid. I had already proven to myself that I was more than capable. I had built something great, Now it was time to take it to new heights. The next chapter was mine to write, and I would write it on my terms. With a newfound sense of purpose, I walked out of that office, ready for whatever the future held. I had everything I needed to succeed, not because of my father, but because of who I had become. The woman who had fought for everything, who had claimed her own destiny. It had been months since I had taken full control of the company, months since I finally felt like I was living life on my own terms. But still, something was missing. I had created success, I had built my empire, but every now and then, I would sit in my office at night, staring out the window at the city below, and I would wonder if this was all there was. Was this truly everything I had dreamed of? For years, I had thought that success was all about the destination, about reaching the top, proving everyone wrong, and showing my father that I was capable of more. But now that I was here, I realized that success wasn't just about what I had built, it was about who I had become along the way. I had spent so much time focusing on proving my worth to others that I had forgotten to focus on myself. As I thought about the path I had taken, I realized that I had spent too much energy pushing forward and not enough time reflecting. I had overlooked the importance of the journey itself. It was in those quiet moments, when everything else seemed to stop, that I began to feel the weight of it all.